Oh, precious people, listen to me tonight, for there is something so holy, so sacred, that burns within my heart. I tremble to even speak it, because I know it is not mine, it is His. The Spirit of the living God has whispered, and I must obey, for Jesus Himself has told me, speaking in tongues is not what you think. Oh, dear ones, do you understand what that means? So many of you have made it into a ritual, a sound, a performance. But it is not that. It is not noise. It is not a sign to impress the world. It is a language birthed in the Spirit, a place where the soul touches eternity, where groanings too deep for words pour out before the throne of grace. I feel His presence right now, and it is so real, so strong, so overwhelming. Oh, beloved, if you could only see how near Jesus is when the Spirit intercedes within you. If you could only feel how heaven itself bends low when that river begins to flow. Tonight, I am not here to teach a doctrine or argue a theology. I am here to tell you that Jesus Himself wants to pull back the veil. He wants to show you that tongues are not a badge of pride, but a surrender of self. It is not about what comes from your lips, but about the brokenness of your heart that lets His Spirit take over. Oh, lift your hands to Him, not for a gift, not for a manifestation, but for Him, Jesus, the lover of your soul. For when He becomes your everything, then the Spirit will pray through you in ways no human mind could understand. And then, my darling, you will know the secret Jesus longed for you to discover. It is not what you think. It is far more glorious, far more intimate, far more holy than words could ever tell. Speaking in tongues is not a performance, but a deep surrender to the Spirit's intercession. And when we begin to understand that, the entire perspective of our spiritual walk shifts into something far more profound than anything human understanding could create. So many people have approached tongues as though it was some outward demonstration to validate their faith, as though it were a marker of spiritual superiority or a ritual that places them above others. But when Jesus whispers into the soul, revealing the true nature of tongues, it becomes clear that it has never been about human pride or religious posturing. Instead, it is about releasing control, giving up the need to manage even the prayers that leave our lips, and letting the Spirit Himself speak what we cannot. There are times when the burdens on the heart are too heavy for language, when grief, longing, or a desperate cry for God refuses to be confined within the boundaries of human vocabulary, and in those moments, tongues become the Spirit's holy intercession, taking what we cannot articulate and placing it before the throne of the Father in purity and power. It is not about the sound itself, nor the syllables that are formed, because those are not what heaven is listening to. Heaven is listening to the surrender of the heart, the willingness to step aside and say, Spirit of the living God, take over. Speak for me. Pray through me. That surrender is the essence of what tongues truly are, and without it, all that remains is noise and empty ritual. There is something beautiful and terrifying in allowing the Spirit to move through us in that way, because it means letting go of control, something human beings cling to so desperately. We want to understand every word, every prayer, every moment of our worship, but tongues strip us of that control and remind us that the Spirit understands more deeply than we ever could. In that surrender, we are reminded that it is not about us at all. It is not about our performance or our image, but about the Spirit carrying our soul's groanings into communion with God Himself. When the Spirit intercedes in tongues, He bypasses the clutter of human thought, the limitations of human wisdom, and the weakness of human will. He cuts through the noise of flesh and pride, lifting prayers that are untainted by our insecurities or ambitions, prayers that flow directly from the Spirit of God to the heart of the Father. And in that exchange, something extraordinary happens. Our souls begin to rest, to find peace in knowing that even when we cannot speak, we are being spoken for. Even when we do not know how to pray as we ought, the Spirit is praying through us with perfect clarity. This is not performance. It is divine partnership, a union so holy that the human tongue is simply the vessel and the Spirit is the voice. So many people fear tongues because they think it is strange, incomprehensible, or unnecessary. But the truth is that it is an act of ultimate trust. It is trusting that the Spirit will never mock you, never mislead you, never waste a single breath, but will pray perfectly according to the will of God. In that moment of surrender, There is no room for performance, because performance demands an audience, while surrender seeks only his presence. Tongues, when understood rightly, are not given to impress men, but to bring heaven down into the human heart. They are not about proving one's spirituality, but about yielding one's spirit to the Spirit who knows all things. The beauty of tongues is that it silences the ego. It silences the need to understand, to analyze, to control. It quiets the inner critic that says your prayers are not eloquent enough, not powerful enough, not long enough. Tongues remove that weight entirely, because the prayer does not come from you, it comes through you. And in that, there is freedom to worship without fear of inadequacy, freedom to commune with God without limitation, freedom to know that you are simply a vessel in the hands of the Spirit. It is not dramatic. It is not theatrical. It is sacred. The Spirit does not perform. He intercedes. He does not put on a show. He draws heaven close. And the moment you surrender to that reality, you discover that tongues were never about you at all. They were about God, His will, His Spirit, His love flowing through the deepest part of you in ways that words could never contain. Jesus revealed that tongues are a language of the soul touching eternity, not a ritual for display. And when you truly begin to understand this truth, it transforms the way you view spiritual gifts altogether. People have often treated tongues as though it were a badge, a symbol to wear in front of others, a proof of their spirituality or their closeness with God. But this is not what Jesus ever intended. The heart of tongues is not bound in the idea of showing others that you have arrived at some higher plane, but in the intimacy of allowing your soul to reach beyond the boundaries of this world into the presence of the eternal. When Jesus says it is not what you think, He is tearing down the walls of human misunderstanding that have built tongues into a practice that is often misused, misunderstood, and misrepresented. It is not an outward ritual, nor is it a mere repetition of sounds. It is a spiritual language that carries weight beyond human comprehension. It is the voice of eternity breaking into time, the language of the Spirit expressed through a surrendered vessel. When the soul touches eternity through tongues, something indescribable happens within the believer. It is as if the Spirit lifts you out of the finite world of human words and places you into the realm of divine communication. The soul becomes aligned with heaven in a way that intellect cannot achieve. This is why tongues cannot be reduced to performance. Performance is about being seen and understood by people. But tongues are about being known by God in the most hidden, intimate way. It is the Spirit's language, not ours. And because of that, it carries a purity that no human effort can counterfeit. The soul, when it reaches into eternity, begins to utter sounds that bypass the mind. The human mind may not grasp them, but the Spirit and the Father do. And in that holy moment, the finite is lifted into the infinite. Many who have misunderstood tongues have done so because they attempted to analyze it from a human perspective. They asked, what do these words mean? What is the structure? What is the purpose if I cannot interpret them? But the truth is, tongues were never meant to fit within human categories of logic or explanation. They belong to eternity, and eternity cannot be boxed into human understanding. Jesus revealed this mystery to show us that tongues are not about us at all. They are about the Spirit's longing to unite our souls with heaven. It is an invitation into deeper intimacy, into a place where we stop striving to control and simply allow the Spirit to pray and praise through us. When your soul touches eternity in this way, you experience a communion that words cannot capture. There are groanings, there are sighs, there are utterances that sound foreign to the ear but are familiar to heaven. The Spirit intercedes with language that is untainted by fear, pride, or doubt. It is communication that flows straight from the depths of your spirit into the throne room of God. You become aware that this is not a ritual that can be taught, not a practice that can be staged. It is a gift that can only flow from surrender. Ritual is about control, about following a script or a formula, but tongues as revealed by Jesus break every script. They remind you that God is not bound by human ritual but delights in living, breathing communion with His children. Tongues are the language of the soul in the same way that tears or deep sighs are the language of the heart. They arise not because you decide to put them on display, but because something deep within you breaks open in the presence of God. When your soul touches eternity, Tongues may come as a flood of sounds or as a quiet whisper. But in either form, they are holy because they are real. They are not performed for men. They are poured out before God. And the more you realize this, the more you understand that tongues are not a symbol of achievement, but a doorway to intimacy. They are not a ritual to prove anything, but a sacred act of yielding everything. The tragedy is that many have cheapened this gift by turning it into something mechanical or by teaching people to imitate it without understanding its essence. But the Spirit cannot be manufactured. The soul cannot be forced to touch eternity. It must be surrendered. Jesus revealed that tongues are not what we think because he wanted us to move beyond the shallowness of performance into the depth of true communion. It is not about sounding spiritual, but about being immersed in the Spirit. It is not about gaining recognition, but about losing yourself in his presence. When your soul touches eternity, you will know it because it cannot be mistaken for anything else. It leaves you changed, humbled and overwhelmed with the reality of God's nearness. And in that moment, tongues cease to be ritual and become revelation. The true power of tongues is found in brokenness, humility, and intimacy with Christ. And this truth dismantles every misconception that has built up around the subject. For so long, people have believed that the power of tongues comes from the volume, the style, or the dramatic expression of the sounds themselves, but that is not where the essence lies. Tongues without brokenness are empty. Tongues without humility are noisy. Tongues without intimacy with Christ are disconnected from their very source. The Spirit does not flow through prideful hearts that seek to elevate themselves, but through surrendered hearts that have been emptied of self. The more broken you are before the Lord, the clearer the Spirit can move through you, because brokenness clears away the walls of self-reliance and allows the Spirit to become your strength. When your heart has been crushed by life, when your pride has been stripped, when you come before him with nothing left to prove, tongues flow not as a performance, but as an overflow of his presence in your weakness. Brokenness is not something many desire, yet it is often in brokenness that the Spirit finds his freedom to intercede. It is when the heart cries out, "Lord, I cannot do this on my own," that tongues become a holy cry of dependence. Words cannot capture the ache of the soul, but the Spirit can, and he does so in a language that transcends human understanding. That is where the power is found, because in that surrender, you are no longer leaning on your own strength, but allowing his Spirit to carry your burdens, your fears, your longings, straight into the presence of the Father. It is the broken vessel, not the polished one, that reveals the light within, and tongues become the song of that vessel, pouring out its need before God. Humility is the other key, for humility keeps you from turning tongues into a tool of pride or competition. How often have believers treated tongues as though it were a medal of honor, as though one could say, "Because I speak in tongues, I am more spiritual than you." But that is not how Jesus sees it. The moment tongues become about comparison, they lose their meaning. True humility in tongues recognizes that it is not about what you are saying at all. It is about what the Spirit is saying through you. You are not the source. You are the vessel. You are not the one who carries the wisdom of the prayer. You are simply the one surrendered enough to let the Spirit speak. And that posture of humility is essential, because without it, tongues become nothing more than noise. It is humility that positions you to be used by God in this way, because humility strips away the ego and places the glory back where it belongs, on him alone. Then comes intimacy with Christ, which is the very heartbeat of tongues. Without intimacy, tongues have no root, no depth, no purpose. They are not a magical formula or a religious act. They are the fruit of a life connected to Jesus. When you walk closely with him, when you spend time in his presence, when you know his voice and feel his nearness, tongues flow as a natural extension of that relationship. They are not something you force, but something that overflows out of love. Intimacy with Christ means you are so connected to him that even when your mind does not know what to say, your spirit still communes with him through the gift of tongues. It is like a secret language shared between lovers, one that no one else needs to understand, because it is not meant for them. It is meant for you and him. That intimacy is where the true power is revealed, because tongues in intimacy become a place of encounter. They are not about external display, but about internal communion. They allow you to draw close in a way that words alone cannot accomplish, because words are often too limited, too shallow, too confined by human thought. Tongues reach into the depths of the spirit, into the hidden places of the heart, and bring them before the Lord in purity. And in that place of intimacy, you are transformed, because every prayer uttered in tongues is not only intercession, it is also shaping you, molding you, drawing you deeper into the heart of Christ. This is why the true power of tongues is inseparable from brokenness, humility, and intimacy. They work together as one. Brokenness keeps you dependent on Him. Humility keeps you surrendered to Him, and intimacy keeps you connected with Him. Without these, tongues risk becoming shallow or misused. But with them, tongues become a holy channel through which heaven meets earth in the most personal way. They cease to be about human effort and instead become about divine expression. In brokenness, you yield. In humility, you bow. In intimacy, you abide. And in that combination, the Spirit finds a place to flow unhindered, to intercede perfectly, and to draw you ever closer to the heart of Jesus. Tongues are a divine mystery where heaven bends low to meet the heart, fully yielded to God. And within this truth lies a beauty that words alone cannot capture. So many people have attempted to explain tongues in purely human terms, reducing them to sounds, to practices, to rituals that can be learned or imitated. But in doing so, they miss the essence of what they truly are. Tongues are not man reaching up to God in his own effort. They are God stooping down, heaven bending low to connect with a heart that has been surrendered. This is what makes tongues holy and mysterious, because they are not born from human wisdom, but from divine initiative. When a believer opens themselves completely to the Spirit, heaven itself leans in and gives them utterance that bypasses human understanding. It is not about what is happening in the mind, but what is being released in the Spirit. And that release is where eternity and time touch. The mystery of tongues cannot be explained fully, because it belongs to the realm of God, not man. Just as creation itself testifies of mysteries beyond our comprehension, so do tongues testify of the Spirit's work within us. You cannot study your way into understanding it, nor can you dissect it until it makes sense, because it is meant to be experienced, not analyzed. The reason it is so mysterious is that it reveals something about God's nature, that He delights in intimate communion with His children in ways that surpass the limitations of language. When you to Him in tongues, you are not performing an act of religion, but stepping into a divine embrace where heaven makes itself known in the groanings of your spirit. The mystery is not meant to confuse, but to draw you deeper, to remind you that God cannot be reduced to formulas, that He will always be greater than your understanding. When heaven bends low in this way, it is not to impress or to create spectacle, but to bring you closer to the heart of God. Tongues are not given to entertain. They are given to connect. They are a sign that God Himself desires to meet you in the secret places of your spirit. Imagine the Creator of the universe, the one who spoke galaxies into existence, choosing to stoop down and give you a language that carries your deepest longings, fears, and praises into His presence without distortion. That is what makes tongues so sacred, because they are evidence of His desire to commune with you beyond the limitations of your own words. In that communion, you realize that heaven is not distant, heaven is near, leaning close to whisper through your surrendered lips. A heart fully yielded to God is the key, because without surrender, tongues cannot flow in their true form. You cannot hold on to pride, control, or resistance and expect the Spirit to move freely. Yielding means letting go of your own understanding, your own agenda, your own need to be in charge, and simply saying, Lord, here I am. Use me. Pray through me. Speak through me. That posture of yielding opens the door for heaven to descend into your ordinary moment and transform it into something extraordinary. It is not about striving. It is about surrender. It is not about what you can produce. It is about what He can release through you. A yielded heart becomes a vessel, and in that vessel, the divine mystery unfolds. Tongues remain a mystery, not because God wants to hide them, but because their essence transcends the human capacity to fully grasp. They carry within them the breath of the Spirit, and the Spirit cannot be contained by human definition. This is why Paul called them mysteries spoken to God, because they bypass human understanding. The very act of speaking in tongues is an acknowledgement that God is greater than you, that you trust Him to express through you what you cannot express yourself. It is a mystery that draws you into dependence, that teaches you humility, that calls you into deeper intimacy. And in that mystery, heaven and earth meet in a way that is both supernatural and deeply personal. When you embrace tongues as a divine mystery, you no longer feel the need to explain them away or to justify them to skeptics. You rest in the awareness that they are a gift, a holy encounter, a language of the Spirit. They remind you that faith itself is mystery, that walking with God has always been about stepping beyond what you see and into what you believe. Tongues become a part of that journey, a tangible reminder that God is present, that He is near, that He delights to meet you where your understanding ends. They are heaven's response to a heart that says yes to God completely, without reservation, without fear, without performance. And in that surrender, in that mystery, heaven truly bends low, and the believer discovers that what once seemed strange or confusing is in fact one of the most intimate ways God has given for His children to commune with Him.